Y'all, this mic stuff new to me. I forgot to cut on the mic or pick up the mic. I completely forgot about it. But I'm a Lourdes. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is kind of a follow up video to the full moon and total lunar eclipse video that we did, but it's with a little shake up because we in the middle of an eclipse portal. So, welcome, welcome, welcome. My name is Jasmine. This is Flourish Homestead and Apothecary. I'm the head healer in charge. And what we do here is we believe that self healing is your birthright. We do that through the ATRs and Indigenous land rights. We do that through making sure that we are living a fully present life, a fully immersed life. And we also do it through ancestral veneration. Some of the tools we use are herbalism and astrology. And that is where everything comes into play with this one video. So, our last video, which you should really dig into because a lot of that energy is still carrying over, and a lot of the rituals, the routines, and the workings that we'll be doing will be based upon the self development work, the soul work, the shadow work that you did during that total lunar eclipse in Pisces energy. And we are actually using the last quarter moon. So the last quarter moon happened in Gemini in the 10th house at 6:33 a.m. on Sunday, right? This is now technically Tuesday morning. So we are at 1:51 a.m. We are right in the middle of honestly heading into the witching hour, which is 3 a.m. to 4 a.m. And this is the perfect time to do some of the things that we are talking about. Okay? And we are doing this because we are in the middle of and when you see me looking down, even though I just spilled water all over not too long ago. But if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my notes because I got this big, beautiful brain. And I'm big and beautiful too, but baby, I'm not about to remember all this energy. But let's hop right back into it. So we're in the middle of an eclipse corridor. And when you're in the middle of an eclipse corridor, if you feel energy, you just know you always don't feel like yourself. And that's intentional. But this particular corridor that we're in, a lot of things are closing. A lot of portals are closing. A lot of work that you spent the whole half of this year doing, or portions of last year, are closing. And that is absolutely because what is going on astrologically and astronomically. And we hit a really important window with this last quarter moon, in particular, to a lot of water energy and water being used as a technology, which is something that we touched on in the last video. But we're going to go into that even deeper here, okay? And that's because we are actually going to be in the process of beginning to close a water portal, a mother portal, water technology portals that all of us have collectively, honestly, been working through since the Cancer new moon this year, which was also Mami Wata's feast day. But I'm jumping ahead of myself. Let me tell you what else. So, what does everything that I just said really mean? Well, what any moon phase means if you are a practitioner, if you work with energy, if you do ancestral veneration, if you follow the lunar calendar, any major cycle of the moon, which the last quarter is a very important day where you can work with a lot of energy. You can work with that energy for its pre-shadow, which is 3 days before, or its post-shadow, which is 3 days after. And sometimes that really, really matters when you want to get granular results. And so there's a specific reason why I'm asking all of us to use this last quarter moon's energy in its post shadow. And that's because its post shadow will actually be in Cancer, right? So the actual last quarter moon went direct at 6:33 a.m. It was in the 10th house on Sunday. And And then not too long after that, it went border course and went into Cancer sometime late yesterday evening, or it might have been in the middle of the night. I don't remember like that. But we are specifically working with this window because we got some energy to move. This eclipse was heavy. And we have some energy to move before we talk about how we work with this Virgo new moon, because we're going to do some working with this Virgo new moon. But in order to work with it and not feel like you're literally doing a 360-degree pivot, even though you are doing a 180 pivot, um, you're going to need to transmute some energy. And the mothers and I had a whole conversation. Okay? So let's hop right into what are these eclipse window dynamics. Number one, when we're in between eclipses. So a lunar eclipse is always about closure and release. And then a solar eclipse is always about initiation and invitation or rebirth. So this could feel like you're walking down a very, very long hallway and you kind of were forced in that hallway in a rush. And immediately, before you could even process what was going on, it's like being kicked out of, someone's home, or being kicked out of somewhere, or experiencing an emergency and having to go, like waking up in a hotel room and the fire alarm went off. You just have to get out really, really fast. And before you could really process what happens, the door closes, boom, and you realize there's no turning back. And so that's what eclipses always represents, the eclipse corridors, when we're in between eclipses. And this one is no different. Actually, I feel like this energy for this eclipse is heavy. And it hasn't been this heavy since Scorpio was in the South Node a couple years ago. And so when we're in that eclipse corridor, when we've already had one eclipse, but the other one hasn't happened yet, and you're in the middle of eclipse season, you could feel like you're floundering and you're waiting for that next door to open, okay? And the reason why we feel like that is because overall, collectively, whenever we enter eclipses, and that's why they've been so notorious throughout time, it's a purging of your shadow. It's a resetting of your system from a spiritual level, from an energetic level, from a metaphysical level. Eclipses, no matter if they're solar or lunar, acts as a reset. And so lunar eclipses, which we just had in Pisces September 7th, it flushes out buried memory and emotional residue, and also ancestral debris. Well, in particular, that's what this one did in Pisces, right? That's what we were feeling. And it can almost feel like you're doing a detox. If you've ever did a detox, that is what it can feel like. So you can have symptoms, eclipse symptoms, honestly, and it could be known like as fatigue, restlessness, dreams, and conflict. The reason why this one feels so destabilizing is because it was such a heavy water eclipse that was compounded by additional water energy, with Jupiter being in Cancer, right? And yeah, and we also, I think, had a stellium going on in addition to it being a full moon and a total lunar eclipse. So we had a lot of energy that was going on. And we desperately, after moving that amount of energy, having that amount of emotional transmutation, like we are just in need of more solar energy, more stabilizing energy. And it hasn't been planning yet. It's not going to come until September 21st. And so I guess when we don't have this solar energy that hasn't been planted, it can feel like you're aware that, like I said, you can't go back, but you have no freaking idea where to go from here. So you're kind of like walking by faith almost, but really you're going to learn later on that this ain't really about faith, right? And that in particular, when we're asking for more structure after such an emotional moon, it could just feel like this eclipse corridor is long. Also, any eclipse is on the node. So the South Node and the North Node. The North Node is sometimes called the true node. Um, are what eclipses happen on. So when you work with eclipses, you are always working with the nodes. And the nodes naturally represent tension. They are not actual celestial bodies, they are mathematical points that represent the place where the sun's ecliptic circle, or the eclipse that it does, the rotation that it does, and the moon's rotation circle meets in the same place. Of course, it's not at the same time, but this is the mathematical points of how we get the north node and the south node, which is why the eclipses take place in 180-degree opposition, or a sister or sibling sign, right? And so that's because this represents tension, right? And so when you've already had the extreme tension of one, you kind of crave the stabilizing energy of another. And this tension often highlights our destiny. In Western astrology, the nodes represent destiny. In Vedic astrology, they represent surges of energy, lessons, previous lessons that you learned in the past, information somewhat about your past lives, but it's really about a restriction of energy because it's frequencies you've already mastered. And the North Node represents frequencies or energy, areas of life, sections of life in which your past iterations haven't mastered those things. So you're more apt to have experiences and surges of experiences in that particular area. I tend to represent, for me, or I tend to be more aligned with the Vedic understanding of the nodes, because sometimes the way we talk about destiny and the way we understand destiny and purpose gets in the way of us understanding the energy behind it, because we assign this positive, I'm trying to find the right word, we assign this positive and or negative or seriousness that often gets aligned with destiny. And for me, flows of energy, surges of energy often represent opportunities. So instead of me putting so much pressure on myself, I'm actually figuring out how to work better with the opportunities that are presented to me in this lifetime. And so the South Node, which is where we are about to have the solar eclipse. Y'all was outside, and like, I know it's late in the season, but I still got bit 3 times by mosquitoes. I was like, what in the desperation? But anyways, the South Node, which the solar eclipse in Virgo is coming up on, is always representing what is collapsing in your life. And so collectively, what is collapsing in all of our lives is Virgo energy, right? And so Virgo energy represents our routine, our mundane. We kind of really went over that, well, in a previous video. So if you want to know more about Virgo energy, please go back and look at the Pisces total lunar eclipse video. And we very much so talked about Virgo energy because it was in opposition to the eclipse, right? And so collectively, we are going through a collapsing, particularly around perfectionism and other like shadow elements of Virgo energy right now. And what is on the horizon, or what has been asking you to like step up to the plate, or what is the energy that's currently coming towards you, is always represented by the North Node, which is in Pisces, in which the total lunar eclipse that happened on September 7th took place on. All right, all right. So now let's move into the logistics of what was the last quarter moon in Gemini. So, like I said, it took place September. I'm sorry, y'all. My foot started itching, so I started scratching it. And it felt good, too. And it took place September 14th at 21 degrees of Gemini. This is the last quarter moon, and it was in the 10th house. Okay, so what does all that mean? We're going to start with what is the last quarter moon. Now, sometimes when I talk about the last quarter moon, because what it represents historically, it can cause a little bit of panic. That is not my intent. My intent is to give us as much information as possible about, like, I recognize, like, I still have a mole on my hand. Anyways, ADHD is getting real. I still have a mole on my hand, and I was like, I haven't went away, but I kind of hit myself when I was in gardening. So it's not really a mole. It's kind of like a scar that's up under my nail. But anyways, we're going to start with the last quarter moon. And sometimes I use the word crisis because historically last quarter moons are associated with crises of consciousness, and it can make it sound more serious than it is. At the core meaning of any portion of the moon cycle is opportunities and how you prepare for those opportunities. And sometimes, yes, the opportunities are rough, and how the things come to you are rough. But a lot of times, if you know how to work with the energy and never be out of flow, it's not really considered a crisis. And that's because it's the last major phase of the moon cycle. So we had a full moon, then we move into a last quarter moon. That's about a week out, right? And those are the last two phases of the moon cycle, but especially the last quarter moon before we start a whole new moon cycle, or a whole new lunar cycle. And so because it's happened after the full moon, and the full moon is about releasing, the full moon is about letting go, the full moon is about protection, the full moon is about purifying, the full moon can be about banishing, right? The full moon can be about warding. The last quarter moon is often still associated with letting go, but also forgiving. Forgiving. And in particular, letting go more so than the last quarter moon, especially after eclipse, represents surrendering, right? And in the case, surrendering and releasing are two different things. Surrendering is to be in flow. Releasing is to overcome the blockages, to overcome things, and then to integrate, because now it has been a week after the full moon. So to integrate, begin that wisdom, still see where you need to let go. And sometimes in very catalyzing moments like right now, it is the time to even think about, now that you've been able to surrender and you've been able to be in flow, but also consciously release, consciously work through things, do that shadow work. It can be a time where you can begin to even dream about the things that you would like to call in, or the seeds that you would like to plant during the Virgo new moon. If you don't really know how to work with eclipses, I wouldn't really recommend calling things in during this solar eclipse, um, in the most loving way possible. But I was just giving an example, okay? Okay. And like I said, historically, last quarter moons can be known as a crisisness of consciousness. After you've done the releasing, after you've faced yourself, after you've done the gratitude of a full moon, after you've done the protection, the banishing, this is, if you see whatever you were intent on letting go, in order for you to be in flow, you'll kind of understand and begin to gain lived experiential wisdom about if it worked or not. And after sometimes the emotions that come along with the full moon, it can be like sort of hard for you to investigate or have that moment of clarity and that moment of consciousness. And that's why sometimes it can be associated with a time of being a crisis of consciousness. But like I said, it's really just a checkpoint. And it's especially so a checkpoint right now when we have such a sacred window, that when you really not only understand the astrology, but you understand the energetic and spiritual components, and even some of the religious components, right? Because we are going to be talking about the Orisha. We are going to be talking about the Loa. Then you can understand why I'm saying this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And hold on, y'all, I low key have to sneeze, and I don't want y'all to hear that. Okay, yeah. Definitely do not want y'all to hear that. And the reason why is because the Virgo new moon is happening in the 10th house. So what you work on during the Virgo solar eclipse could absolutely, in addition to the work that we do today and the work that you did during the full moon, help you realign your 10th house, your public energy, your public standing, your career. It could be a lot of that energy, especially working with Virgo. So because the 10th house is represented by Capricorn, which is career, but the 6th house and Virgo, they represent work. And so when work and career come together, you can really stand to begin the internal processes, which you should be working on. If any sort of workings you should be doing on a solar eclipse, or a solar eclipse, is really, it really shouldn't be on planting like new seeds. It should be on internal alignment and restructuring of the self, right? So after the integration from the last quarter moon, this next upcoming Virgo solar eclipse, because it is an eclipse, you should only work on internal restructuring, right? So I wanted to hyper emphasize that. Now, there are some practitioners who like to work with things just the way that they are. And if they follow a certain house system, if they follow certain traditions in astrology, they like to work with it as is. So for the people who want to work with Gemini energy, even though I don't recommend it, and that's why I'm not talking about it as much, we're going to go through that, because at the end of the day, I am a guide, and I want to guide you in the right place, even if I lovingly disagree. And so the moon is in Gemini. It's in the 10th house. The 10th house is the same house that the Virgo solar eclipse will happen in on September 21st. And so the moon often represents your emotions, your internal self, your instincts too, but to a certain degree, because your instincts can also be ruled by Scorpio, or can be ruled by Mars in the 1st and the 8th house. But that's neither here nor there. And the 10th house, like I said previously, is represented by Capricorn and Saturn, and it represents your career, your public realm, your calling, your community role, and your visibility. And so when we are talking about all of this, that internal restructuring that you should be working on is at the end of the day going to feel very external, because of the nature of the 10th house, because it's really telling you that what you're working on will soon become public. Now, that timeline is dependent upon you, where you are in life, your mindsets, your habits, and also, in my opinion, your astrology, okay? And so with this being said, it really is highlighting your stance on, with this last quarter moon in Gemini in the 10th house. It's highlighting your stance on what you've been telling yourself. So inner voice, self-talk, communication, Gemini, 3rd house, right? About what is your role in society. 10th house energy, Capricorn energy, Saturn energy. So all that is being highlighted with this last quarter moon in Gemini, right? In the 10th house. And so when the moon is in Gemini in the 10th house, you can feel like you're standing on stage and you're reading a script. But all of a sudden, halfway through, even though those are your words, the script doesn't align with you anymore. It doesn't resonate with you anymore. It doesn't call, it's not a calling from your soul anymore, but you're on stage, so you have to go through with it. And that is because this moon, if you're working with Gemini energy, is really asking and highlighting what are your emotions and what are your reputations. So how do you show up emotionally in your personal life? In personal life, with Gemini here, is absolutely about yourself. It's absolutely about your communication with yourself. It could be about communication with other people, but it's about communication with yourself. And so this last quarter moon, it could be deeply affecting, if you are following it the traditional way, mutable signs. Mutable signs are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. And since this moon happened at 21 degrees of Gemini, it absolutely could be most impacting people who are 21 to 26 degrees of mutable signs. And what this lunation highlights is outdated narratives around career, reputation, or your role in society. It's really asking you, in your public life, are you living authentically to who you are? 4th house energy, Cancer energy, right? And that's important, because even though the last quarter moon went direct in Gemini, for most of the day, it was actually in Cancer. And so for me, that's why it mattered where it was, because the post shadow, or the next phase after Gemini, is Cancer, and that's where it'll spend most of its time in. But if you are, and you can, if you know how, to work with the Gemini energy, it's really asking you to be able to assess, like, are you living authentically in your public life, or are you wearing a mask that no longer fits? And it's also asking you in other ways that might not necessarily show up in the question that I asked you, around narratives around your reputation, your career, and your role in society. And at a micro level, it's asking you, do your words align with your role in community? A lot of times, my role in community was to be the voice of the people, but I'm too raw around these edges, baby, and I'm gonna tell that damn truth, and I don't care who would offend. And sometimes that's really who I am. That's who I am personally, and who I had made a career out of did not align with who I was authentically. So I had to let that shit go, because if I can't tell the truth, I don't need to be there. And here I am, talking to you about astrology at 2 o'clock in the morning, living out my dreams. And yeah, living out my dreams is hard, but I'm living in alignment, because when I was living a lie, I was miserable. And though that lie was very 10th house energy, I was ready to fight a motherfucker, because I wasn't happy. And life is about you being happy, not about what other people view you. And so a lot of that energy, and that's why I tell that story, could be coming up if you're working with Gemini energy during this last quarter moon. And then it's also asking you to update what outdated forms of self-talk, especially are negative or down-putting, that keeps you playing small in the public eye. For me, it was being politically correct. A lot of the things that I did, a lot of the narratives that I wrote, a lot of the political work, because that's what I did. And, you know, to some extent, I still do it, but now I do it my way, right? Sorry, I am going to self-care on camera. But a lot of the work that I did, 10th house energy, was about being politically correct, was about respectability politics. And respectability politics is assimilated white culture. And one thing I'm not going to be, as a Black radical and a Black nation builder at the end of the day, is assimilate to white politics to make somebody feel comfortable about the fact that you know what you did. And we going to stand on it. And so because of me not subscribing in my life personally to respectability politics, to fake politeness, not kindness, but politeness, which was really metabolized white supremacy, it did not work well for me in my public life. And I had to walk away from those aspects of my career because it would have took me out. You hear me? And it's also asking you, the last question, if you're going to work with this Gemini energy, am I speaking life into my purpose? Or am I draining life from my purpose and therefore myself through doubt and distraction? And also through assimilation and through losing your voice, right? Okay, so what's enhancing this energy is Uranus is in Gemini. And it is in the 9th house. So it's not in the 10th house with the last quarter moon, but it is in the 9th house. And Uranus, me and this planet got a story history. I almost said it was one of my favorite planets, but I had to stop myself because I'm not really sure. And I don't want to lie to y'all. But Uranus represents rebellion, right? Uranus represents innovation, which I love. Uranus represents liberation, which I love. And it's at 1 degree Gemini. And it's really the backdrop for this last quarter moon if you were working with it in Gemini energy. And especially with this 9th house energy, it's really asking us about rebellion, about innovation, about liberation in the areas of higher truth, philosophy, and spirituality. And so again, Uranus really governs areas of life like rebellion, innovation, liberation. And it also talks about chaos, but chaos to make things more equitable. Chaos because of the humanitarian energy that is associated with Aquarius, in which Uranus governs, right? And so all of that energy sort of mixed up in Uranus's frequency. And then when you mix the 9th house with it, I lost my place, y'all. The 9th house represents philosophy, spirituality, wisdom, thoughts, higher learning, but also cross-cultural knowledge, right? Other people's culture. And together, they both revolutionize how we teach. Hello. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm in my bedroom with 777 hertz on. Just wanted to say that. And it's also saying, because like, if you understand anything about ninth house energy, Sagittarius energy, or Jupiter energy, it is not about blind faith. It is not Neptunian. It is not Piscean energy in that way. It's asking you to be experimental with knowledge, and with blending your intuition, your innate knowing. Now, that is Pisces energy, because we are in that eclipse corridor with new ideas, creating radical new ways of learning, radical new ways of connecting, right? That Aquarian energy, because Aquarius and Uranus are inextricably linked, right? And it's also asking about borders. During this time period, with Uranus being in Gemini, do borders exist? Are they man-made? I think they are. The life is real. Humans are real. And will always be. The land is real. Those are the things that are real. So even borders right now with this Uranus, especially in the ninth house, could be reevaluated. And borders could be actual borders around nations, but it could be boundaries, and it could be self-talk because of that Gemini element, right? It could be self-talk. It could be communication. So just wanted to throw that out there. And so what it's really asking you with this Uranus element, with this last quarter moon in Gemini, is what are your, and asking you also about emotional cleansing. Because when the moon and Gemini get together, it's really about how rational intelligence and emotional intelligence come together. And through that connection, creates new information that is emotionally nourishing. We're going to talk more about that. But it supports emotional cleansing by asking what are old beliefs, dogmas, philosophies that need to be released, so you can step into this newer, freer, and more innovative role in your 10th house, in your public life. And Uranus wants radical freedom in thought, but also in belief, and also in pushing against inherited. There goes that ancestral energy, the things that you were supposed to be doing a lot of releasing and a lot of transmuting around during that lunar eclipse that happened a week ago, about inherited dogma, philosophies, and also state traditions. State traditions absolutely have to do with what I talked about with borders. And because of the current state of the world, I'm not going to talk about borders here. You would have to catch me behind a paywall. And that's for a very specific reason. Okay. And so when the moon is in Gemini each and every month, because every 28 days we begin a new lunar cycle, it's asking you to evaluate, how do you speak about yourself? What ideas are you carrying that you no longer need to? And how is your voice being called forward right now during this time period? Also, whenever the moon is in Gemini, it's a reminder that language and communication are spell work. So prayers, journaling, scripting, petitions, and even conversations carry medicine. Now, if you look in the comment section, you will see the link to Flourish's Payhib, because we released a portion of our Grimory for 2025 with the new moon in Gemini that recently passed during Gemini season. And if you really want to learn how the voice, if you really want to learn how language, if you really want to learn how communication, how prayer, there were so many prayers in there, are spell works, especially right now, if you're going to work with the moon and the last quarter moon being in Gemini, please get that workbook. Because it'll be able to walk you through how they are not only spell work, but they're medicine. And even the ancestral and the air components of it. So if you really want to learn about that, to learn how to lock in on that energy before we get out the post shadow, please buy that. And so it is also asking you under this last quarter moon to forgive your old words. Forgive your old words that you might have had for yourself, and forgive the words that you might have had, your old words, because you were playing a role in the community that wasn't really who you were. If you just maybe even outgrown those words. Like a lot of the words that I said in public at some point in time, I might have stood by at a certain time, because certain parts of my personality don't change. So I stand by things a lot. But for me, and I'm not saying this for everybody else, it could be about also you taking the time to allow yourself to forgive, because you have wisdom and you know better. Hold on, y'all, I'm gonna get some water. This incense, even though it smells good, it is blowing right in my face and it's taking my breath away. Also, this last quarter moon with this Uranus element is asking you to release self-talk that keeps you small, and also to reclaim your voice and know that your voice is a ritual. Your voice is sacred. Your voice is holy. Your voice is divine. Don't let anybody take it from you, not even yourself. And this also, like I said, is an emotional and an intellectual connection. So under the last quarter moon in Gemini, information, connection, and change is a breeding ground for emotional nourishment. So if you're working exclusively with this Gemini energy, it might be a time period in which you were able to intellectualize a lot of the things that you may have been feeling beginning, that you became conscious around with the total lunar eclipse that happened last week. And what all of this is really asking you is to prep for the Virgo solar lunar eclipse in the 10th house, so that you can enter a new cycle in your public life or your career. Now, like I said, if you know what I know, how I know what I know, you should really be working with this moon in Cancer, not Gemini. And this is literally tied to the eclipse. It's also tied to the axis that the eclipse is on. So the Pisces Lunar Eclipse, September the 2nd, right? Or September the 7th, sorry, was about flushing karmic and ancestral residue via our nervous system, via our bloodline contracts, and also energies around silenced voice, and how your voice could be silenced for multiple generations. And so this Gemini last quarter moon is really a mental clearinghouse, but also a bridging moon, like we talked about, to get us over the hump into that solar energy really being able to loop in. And like I said, the last quarter moon, this one, if you're going to work with Gemini energy, is, I would recommend petitions, I would recommend prayers. And since we are a house that works with the Orisha, I would recommend that you work with Eshu. But let me tell you something. As a person who has been working deeply with Eshu for the past year, and Bible been deliverance, let me just tell the truth. Don't you come to him disrespectful, because he gonna make you think you got through. He gonna clown your ass. So if you gonna open a crossroad, and I recommend, if you gonna work with the Orisha, every time you talk to the other side, you need to ask Eshu. You need to ask Ilegua. You need to ask Papa Legba. Papa Legba, Baba Legba is what I call him. To open that road. Right now, if I look up, there's a prayer that I say every time I'm about to use my Gemini mouth to say something. I'm not going to tell y'all what it is, but best believe me and Papa Legba get down. And I'm telling you, because I revere him and I honor him, and he's one of my fathers. Come to him with respect, because I hate to see you get dog walked. And I have to say that if I'm going to tell you that the last quarter moon in Gemini is really a reflection of his frequency. And this would be a good time for that solar eclipse for you to open the road. Open the roll, you can use orange candles like this. As you can see it, I've been opening a lot of ancestral rolls with that particular candle. Can't tell you what it's for, but I can tell you, me and Papa Legba, we were working real bad on that one. And that particular one, we are working through an ancestral cycle in particular, okay? So let's move into Cancer energy. So we're about to like really jump right into our rituals, our routines, and our workings. And like we've talked about, this is an eclipse portal, and the North Node was in Pisces. And I would recommend that you work with the mothers for this move. First of all, Yemoje governs Cancer energy because she is the moon. And when I say she is the moon is just one of Yemoje's avatars. Yemoje is much bigger than the moon. Yemoje is the ocean, which is why the moon is governed, or the moon governs or is associated with the ocean, nourishment, life-giving. So it's always easier to work with the moon when the moon is at home, especially when you know how to call down the energy properly, right? But this moon, with the Pisces energy that kicked off this eclipse corridor, and like I said last time, Pisces is associated with old cool energy when you study how the two systems can lay on top of each other. So one system is Ifa of the Yoruba or Nago people, and astrology is another system that was created by Black people, if I'm being real with you. There's no way around it. But how we tracked cosmology in West Africa and the science that came out of the Hellenistic period of Egypt, that basically the Greek and the Romans took, became what we know to be modern day Western astrology. And because, or when you lay those two systems on top of each other, Olukun's energy or frequency or archetype really does match up closely with Pisces energy, even though they are of different traditions, different people, different cultures. Just with the understanding that energy is universal. Period. And so I say all of this because I'm going to make a preface before we jump into the rituals, the routine, and the workings, because I don't like sending people into anything blind. I don't like I just gave that warning about Papa Legba. I don't want y'all going in and working with none of this energy if you don't have the proper reverence or the proper respect. So on any given day, I would not ever recommend you work with Pisces energy, you work with Yemoje's energy, and you work with Olukun's energy all at once. This is very unique because of the astrological and the eclipse configuration and the overall mother activation that was really kicked off around the Cancer new moon. And that was in late June during Cancer season, okay? So this alignment is rare and not meant to be invoked willy-nilly or new age. We're not new age around here. We're quantumly Black. We've been here. We're cosmic, but we're also So we don't approach our first ancestors, which are the Orisha, with disrespect, disdain, or with the transactionalization of living through end-stage capitalism. Let me just call it out like that. So if you're going to work with this energy, only work with it because it's an eclipse. You actually did the work you were supposed to do during the full moon. You got the signs that it worked. And I would even recommend that not only do you need the reverence and the sanctity and the integrity of it all, but you need to be skilled. And even better if you are initiated, especially if you're going to work with Olokun. Period. But if you are not, can't tell you what to do. But I can tell you to approach Yemoje, Mamafu, to approach Olakun, Mamafu. You need to have respect. And how I'm telling you how to work should not be done outside of a particular window, right? So right now it is September 16th at 2:34 a.m. How you work with this energy should not take place after September 16th, which is today, at 11:16 p.m. when the moon goes vortice course. That's why I spent that much time explaining to y'all. You can work with it how I'm telling you to work with it if you want to. After 11:14, you're going to hear, right? And the reason being is once this portal closes and this particular alignment closes, once the mothers have spoken, they have spoken. And it's like all Black mothers. They said what they said. So if I was you, I wouldn't get caught. And so why are we able to do this with the last quarter, with last quarter energy and this last quarter moon? Especially if the last quarter was in a sign like Gemini, and I'm like telling you to work with it in Cancer. How can we use our workings, our routines, and our rituals to really work with this Cancer energy? And like I said, in between eclipses, a lot of rules don't apply. Now, universal law still matters at an energetic and a metaphysical level. But because of how portals work, certain rules are lessened or deactivated for a certain amount of time. And so with that being said, this last quarter moon really wasn't about Gemini because it wrestled heavily in karmic resets and water technological energy. If you were going to do workings, it should be in Cancer because that is what the energy is aligning with, right? Now, the Gemini new moon that took place during Gemini season really was about planting seeds of that language that I was telling you about, language as being divine, communication as being divine, prayer, thought, voice. But during this Gemini last quarter, these seeds are really overstimulated because they're not really meant to be touched right now, right? And that's because there was a lot of, there will be a lot of activation with this energy during the full moon in Gemini that happens during Sagittarius season. But that's here nor there. So with this last quarter moon, if you're really trying to work with that particular energy that we talked about in the first part of the video, I perceive that you could be overstimulated, having nervous system buzzing, pretty close to burnout, be very scattered in your thoughts, or be spiraling. And so to me, that's why it's easier for us to work with Cancer energy, right? And so, his hair got in my mouth. Why Cancer? So like I said, the Pisces total lunar eclipse was very, very activating for all water signs. And it was very, very activating because the full moon trined all the water signs, but also because there was a portal, there was a mother portal that was opened and held down by the mothers this year. And like I said, also Yemoje is one of the governing Orisha of 2025 with Ogun. So she been everywhere. And with that being said, the Pisces lunar eclipse, which happened on September 7th, was really like a watery climax of like grief, memory, and nervous system codes and ancestral currents that really flooded your field, right? And this emanation of that water portal, like I said, actually began during the Cancer new moon, which was also Mami Wata's feast day. And that's very important because you had Yemoje governing the new moon, as she does all moon energy, but especially highlighted with the moon being in Cancer. And then it happened on Mami Wata's feast day. And so this began for us a new cycle, a new healing cycle around the home, womb, care, body memory, ancestral protection. And under this Cancer moon, we begin the process of closing that portal. Okay, so we are dissolving. Hold on. Sitting up my supplements so I can crisscross applesauce. We are dissolving survival codes, bloodline burnout, bloodline burdens, and also spiritual fatigue that you have carried unknowingly, epigenetically, and through your bloodline. And like we talked about previously in the last video, it could be brought up by your dreams, by grief, by exhaustion, or even the urge to disappear. Like, since this portal been open, don't ask me to do nothing, but I mean, I am, as you can see. But it's not that I don't really want to be here. It's that I only want to be in public, safe places, right? Very Cancer energy, very home energy. So wanted to say that. And again, the areas that it is especially centering is around safety, caregiving, womb work, emotional nourishment, and water memory. And the other side of this is that Virgo new moon, in which we will be rebuilding our patterns around our routines and around systems of our bodies. And a lot of this ancestral healing, a lot of this bloodline burden contract, a lot of this spiritual fatigue that we've been feeling, this portal with this current moon in Cancer is really acknowledging the fact that the tides of this energy have been coming in and out of our life since June. And if you really track the history, we can really say January when we had the Cancer full moon during Capricorn season, because tis. It wasn't the roughest one, but I immediately knew after that Cancer full moon that a portal was getting ready to open. And the mothers was getting ready to have a conversation. And here we are. And I was right. Okay, so what are the questions that we are going to be moving around, right, to make way for that Virgo full moon about this portal? And the questions that will be like, how do I put this in a better way? The questions that will be guiding our rituals, our routines, and our workings will be: one, how do you cleanse your body after spirit has shown you too much? Would it been a total lunar eclipse on Yemoje's feast day with Oshun's feast day the day after, and Olokun is associated with Pisces energy, and don't none of them mothers play, even if they love you, which they do. And Pisces is associated with Neptune and the 12th house energy and spirit overall. It's going to show you too much. So what do you do to get back into your body? What do you do to cleanse your body? For me, it's literally spending time in water, shower, baths, drinking a lot of water. That's one way, especially after I had the downloads that I had. And the downloads that I had didn't come on the actual eclipse. It came started a week out, and they were very overwhelming. So I slept a lot, I drank a lot of water, I spent a lot of time in the shower, right? And that's very important things that you need to know, especially thinking about that question as we're working through our rituals, our routines, and our workings. Question 2 is, how do you mother your nervous system after ancestral grief is risen? And I'll even take it a deeper question now that we're in the midst of this lesson. Do you know how to tell the difference between your grief, collective grief, and ancestral grief when you really investigate it and understand that grief is a technology, and it's a technology that Black folk, indigenous folk, we can do real well? So, in addition to how do you mother your nervous system after ancestral grief is risen, is do you know the difference between ancestral grief, collective grief, and your own personal grief? That absolutely is an additional guiding question as we're getting ready to go into our rituals, our workings, and our routines. And then, how do you call back pieces of yourself that have dissolved in water, right? And when this water was too deep to stand in. So since emotions and water are governed by the same energy, basically the same technology, the same frequency, boom, 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 boom. And since the body is represented by salt, how do you call back pieces of your body after there has been an emotional and an ancestral surge of like grief and healing around emotional nourishment, around safety, right? And all these very home protection based things? How do you come back to center? What somatic process do you have to realign yourself with the earth and with the present reality that your physical embodiment is in? Okay, so even though this portal works with Yemoje, Olokun, Oshun, and Mamiwata, this moon's energy is really about that we are calling in Olokun, Mother Olokun, and Mother Yemoje, right? And Oshun and Mamiwata are supporting threshold mothers who will probably have a different conversation with us during a different time. Well, Oshun had real big conversations with us during the Taurus new moon and the Libra full moon that's already passed, but neither here nor there. And so Olokun hides the deepest waters, the shadow, the unconscious, your unretrievable memories, while Yemoje is the surface waters, the mothering, the nurturance, the flood, and the salt. Okay? And so together, they're about the cleansing, the resetting of our routines, and also about closing out emotional gates that were pretty much opened. Well, it wasn't open, but maybe there was a surge of energy during that Pisces total lunar eclipse. And this is because Olokun and Yemoje would like to bless and purify the threshold that we are getting ready to walk into for that Virgo structure around commitment in the next phase of our public lives. Because again, the mothers want you to win, but they never gonna sugarcoat and tell you what like you need to let go of. Sometimes your mother tells you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. Okay? And so let's get into the math or the science behind it. So the math and the science are the feast days that took place, and the astrological and the astronomical. A lot of people who do astrology are not astronomers. I pass no judgment, but I am not one of them. And whenever a religious moment, which Ifa is, and so is Vodun, or the Loa, is, aligns with astrology and with astronomy, I'm particularly apt to listen. Okay? So, September the 7th, like I keep on saying, with that Pisces total lunar eclipse and blood moon. It was also Yemoje's feast day. So, that is why Yemoje and Olokun rule over the energy of this portal, because both of them came forward during that Pisces total lunar eclipse, because it was, sorry about that, y'all, it was Yemoje's feast day. We had a lot of tomato sauce, you can taste it too, but it was Yemoje's feast day, and Olokun is associated with Pisces energy. Okay, and then the day after that, September 8th, was Oshun's feast day. Oshun is the daughter of Yemoje. Yemoje got many daughters, but it's one of the highly revered daughters, right? And again, her feast day has always historically been known as the day after Yemoje's, because Yemoje is all water, right? And then Oshun is fresh water. the water that we can drink, the water without salt in it, okay? And Olokun stepped forward after that eclipse energy and holding space for, or not said Olokun, sorry about that. Oshun stepped forward in her sweetness. My bad, y'all. Really held the space and held the threshold for her mother Yemoje and for Olokun. And she also kind of just buffered a lot of the emotional energy that we were feeling after that eclipse, because I'm pretty sure most of us were fatigued. And then this Cancer moon that we are currently in is the next major phase in the moon cycle after we've had that Cancer new moon during Cancer season, so late June, early July, in which it was also Mami Wata's feast day. So Mami Wata also was a threshold supporter of pushing this energy out, right? And like, not that Yemoje or Olokun need any help getting through any threshold, but sometimes when you're dealing with such depth, like the primordial waters of Olokun, and Olokun representing the unconsciousness and deep, deep ancestral contracts, right? It really has to be additional supporting energy to bring it up to the surface, to bring it up to the conscious. And so Oshun was there to sweeten it. And Mami Wata was there to add more of that nourishing support, that mothering support, right? Because Yemoje was very, very much so standing 10 toes down and in alignment with Olokun. And it was about telling you what you need to hear, not what you want to. Right? And again, during that Cancer new moon that happened, Yemoje was and Mami Wata were really working together to really push through that crescendo that was the incoming Pisces total lunar eclipse that we were having, right? Or we were going to have on September 7th. And so that's why I'm bringing that up. And so you had 3 feast days, 3 mothers, and 1 ritual portal. The mothers want more from you than your thoughts. I'm going to just keep a look. Period. I don't know what else to say when you're working with water technology. I'm not going to say your thoughts don't matter, but the mothers want your body. They want your breath. They want you to surrender, right? And this Cancer new moon isn't just a lunar transit, but it's about the beginning part of a closing ceremony in which a mother-led eclipse and water was like the technology, right? Okay, so that was in one notebook because I wanted to write the intro because, like I said originally, this information was supposed to be put behind our Patreon, right? Because these were the full moon workings, rituals, and routines, right? And so during that time period, if you go back and look at that full moon video, we talked a lot about the fact that that total lunar eclipse in Pisces, right, bringing up that Olokun and that Yemoje energy, was also the corn moon for Turtle Island. And we walked through the many different cultures, right, including the Maroons, including the Gullah Geechee, including the Seminole, including the Muskogee, the Creek, who really worked with the corn moon and made matriation possible here on Turtle Island, right? So we've already talked about the rituals, the workings, and the routines from our indigenous and our hoodoo roots perspective, right? Now we're talking about the combination of all the shadow work, the emotional work, the intuition work, but also a little bit of the divination, right? And the psychic enhancement of that moon. And also, again, helping to close out the portal because the moon is in Cancer. So in addition to the guiding questions that I just said, the things that we'll be focusing on with these rituals, workings, and routines is emotional healing. So working through solutions, working through past wounds, candle workings, right? Candle rituals, affirmations, and also embodiment words. We'll also be walking through certain forms of dream work, enhancing our dream recall, our lucid dreaming. We'll have some information about dream pillows and also some sigil workings and some dream altars that you can work with during this time period. We'll be working with psychic development. So that means enhancing the intuition, psychic abilities, mediumship, telepathic, kinetic, ley line development because of that Virgo Sun, Mercury, and that South Node energy, especially because all that energy is about to be super, super enhanced by the upcoming solar eclipse that's about to hit it. Also, this rituals, workings, and routine will also center obviously around water element working. So rituals and workings that align with water element and water energy. So that is spiritual baths, rinses, simmer pots, moon water, floor washes, and also oceanic or sea salt rituals, really honoring the fact that we are exclusively working with Yamoje, with Olokun, and with Pisces energy, right? And this is especially enhanced by, like I said, the fact that the eclipse took place on Yamoje's feast day, and that this moon is currently in Cancer. And anytime the moon is in Cancer, it's all about Yamoje taking the center stage, okay? So, like we just talked about, the Orisha and other deities that represent water energy are Yamoje, Oshun, Mamiwata, Olokun, particularly what we are working with. It's with the understanding that water is a technology. And we will be talking about water as a technology, but it will be on our Patreon. So make sure that you subscribe to our Patreon or be on the lookout for that information when that class goes public, okay? And so with this energy that you have to work with until 11:14 tonight, right? I wouldn't recommend the fact that we talked about moon waters, right? With our ritual working and routines. But with typically Pisces full moons, but especially the one that happened that was a total lunar eclipse, it would have been very feasible to work with the different sort of moon waters, right? That you would be able to collect during that time period. Because we aren't working with this energy past 11:14 p.m., I don't recommend you setting out any moon water because it's already 3 o'clock in the morning. So if you're seeing this, you're not prepped, everything, yada yada. So don't want to talk about moon water during that time period, okay? But we can talk about doing dream work divination. So during nap time, during different other things, you can really enhance your clairvoyance by putting mugwort in a satchel. And I think actually mugwort. I don't believe in promoting capitalism, but I just wanted to show what mugwort looks like. Mugwort would be great to put in a satchel. I'm not going to show y'all my satchels and mojo bags on here, but it would be a divine time to use mugwort and put it in a satchel. I would recommend, if it's from a hoodoo perspective, that satchel either be made of blue flannel or have a piece of blue flannel in it. And in it, in addition to the mugwort, I will put star anise and lavender. Tomorrow before 11:14 p.m. would be a very good time to take a spiritual bath or a sorrow relief. So a grief transmutation where you mourn your crossed over ancestors or your crossed over loved ones. And in there, I would add Florida water. And what I mean Florida water is if you've made your own. I don't recommend using this Florida water in your spiritual baths. This for me, because I also am a chemistry head and an energetic head, I know how to use this to making cleansing. But I do not recommend you using this Florida water in your spiritual bath. I would recommend that you buy some local and handmade if you're going to take any spiritual bath and add Florida water, right? If not, you could make your own Florida water on and look up here. We're on YouTube. You can look up ways to make your own fresh batch of Florida water, and it would be the equivalent of basically a simmer pot. And then I would use that to create my own form of Florida water. Camphor cubes. I forgot to pick up my camphor cubes. They are somewhere else. Rue, hyssop, sea salt, and a blue candle. I would recommend while you are taking that spiritual bath. Now, if you were a badass, I have to say this because, you know, me and Papa Legba, we get down. But if you were a badass and you collected eclipse water, I'm going to need you to make a crossroads water offering. See, here's the thing. You can open the road through air. You can open the road through communication. You can open the road through that sort of, you know, spell work. But you can absolutely open the road with water. So if you collected moon water for that eclipse, especially from natural sources, so like river, if it rained, or you collected ocean water, ocean moon water, you're that girl. You're that sibling, number one. And then number two, absolutely make crossover water. Make a crossover water offering. Again, I would do this like, I would push the limit. So if you are not supposed to work with this moon past 11:14, I'm going to be outside between 10:45 and 11. And I'm going to be using water to open the road, to do a crossroads. Now, in my humble opinion, when you work with Baba Legba, you should already be using water to open the road. It's not a must. But with everything that's going on, if you're not offering Baba Legba water, especially water that's been on your ancestor altar, with your left hand, and again, the best water would have been water collected during the total moon eclipse, right? And it came in from a natural source. So rainwater, river water, or ocean water. And pouring it at the crossroads with a touch of white rum, with a copper coin. Do that copper coin. Do that. Don't you pour that water if you don't do that copper coin. And make sure you pray in addition to those offerings to Baba Legba, because Baba Legba does represent Mercury energy. So it's best you use the frequency of voice like before, during, or immediately after. Don't make him wait. When you were doing a crossroads water opening, right? Also, it would make it better if you had a red or black key. And the water, like I said, should be poured with the feminine hand. Okay. One other thing that you could do, especially if you were going to do the grief or sorrow bath, is a tear jar or a salt jar. And that is where you basically, it's another form of grief transmutation. So you capture your tears in a small valve of or small glass. And then, or if you can't capture your tears, maybe use some of that moon water that you have, or use some fresh water, right? Or distilled water. Add salt and seal it with a blue candle or blue wax and bay leaf. Okay, now let us move into the good part, and this is the part that you absolutely can do in reference to Yamoje and Olokun, right? And again, we've already talked about reverence and different other things like that, but doing research, number one. So again, understanding who Yamoshe is, the mother of all waters, protective children, patron of motherhood, deep emotional healing, aligns with like this Pisces energy of compassion and grief, and also a soul surrender and soul sovereignty. So a really good way to work with Yamoshe and Olakun, with this moon currently being in Cancer, is a sacred blue bath. So a sacred blue bath, you can use bluing. I'm not going to get up to show y'all because I do have bluing on my altar, but use bluing, blue iris, also white roses. I have white roses on my ancestor altar for Yamoshe's feast day, and I preserved them. Milk, honey, crushed eggshells, sea salt. All this would be very, very good for emotional healing and a water blessing. That'd be very, very good to do. Also, a offering bowl. This could be one of the best ways, and also one of the quickest ways. Of course, when we work with our first ancestors, the Orisha, we don't rush the process, but we are embodied, and sometimes we do have restrictions. So, offering bowl. And so, an offering bowl could look like water, shell, silver jewelry, watermelon, molasses, and we can place that at your home altar, right? A river, a ocean, and especially with this eclipse happening during Yamoshe's feast day and then Oshun's feast day right after, and we're right back in the moon in Cancer. If you can't, many of us don't live in the ocean, including myself, this would be absolutely good to do like an offering bowl at a river, right? And the only thing I would recommend is if you were making an offering bowl to Yamoshe and you're doing it at a river, you need to ask Oshun for permission and show her reverence and give her an offering too. That's just how this works. Another way you can do this is through an invocation prayer. In my highest alignment, I would recommend the invocation prayer to only be done by initiated people, but you can make your own, right? And making your own is a special type of reverence and embodiment, aligning yourself with into the energy and surrendering to Olakun and Yamoshe's energy. Yeah. You can do moon mirror invocations also. So a very good time to do mirror workings, right? And if you were going to do a mirror working, I would recommend a handheld small mirror that is submerged while you're doing the moon mirror invocation, like submerged in water. Okay, so Olakun represents deep waters, mysteries, and also our underworld wealth, right? And so Olakun is the owner of primordial waters. Oceans, our deepest secrets, the initiator of sacred ancestral wisdom, because our first ancestors came from water. The bearer, and Olakun is known as the bearer of a spiritual and material wealth. Of course, we have talked about connected through Pisces via depth, dreams, ancestral soul contracts, and also oceanic mysteries. And what you can do to work with Olakun's energy is, number one, ask for permission. Olakun don't like being disturbed. So ask permission. Let's see if it goes through. And if you don't know if it went through or not, I recommend working with Olakun, because it probably means you're not skilled enough. And Olakun is the type of Orisha where respect is paramount, right? If you are going to work with Olakun, you ask permission, the permission is granted. Show reverence by doing a deep sea protection bath, which should include eucalyptus, bay leaves, charcoal, and obsidian stone should be soaked in the water. And this is for power reclamation and psychic shielding specifically. So when you're asking for permission from Olakun, make sure you mention, right, the ancestral wisdom, because your ancestors came from water, of the primordial waters, but also understanding the things that Olokun governs in this portion of life. And this specifically asks for psychic shielding or power reclamation, which are things that Olokun typically would want to work with. But A, it is all about asking permission, and B, it is all about how you ask. And then your body, because you need to get in the water, and the herbs and the obsidian stone are the offering. Okay? An ancestral wealth invocation. I would absolutely recommend you doing an ancestral wealth invocation if you're going to work with Olokun's energy. And so that is laying a silver coin in a bowl of salt water overnight under the moon. And I would let that bowl sit out, particularly on my ancestral altar, until 11 o'clock tonight. That's what I would do if I were you. If you did also work with Olokun, I pull out all the stops for Olokun when she wants to work with me. And I would also recommend doing a blue and black candle vigil. One candle being for depth, which is the black candle, and then the blue candle being for the ocean. I would recommend dressing, getting frankincense. And then using darkened water. Sit and get both the blue candle and the black candle near a darkened bowl of water. You can darken the water with blue ink or with tea. Or with, what's that, blue pea? That one. You can use those. I would actually recommend, if you're going to work with Olokun, that you really pull out all the stops. So if you are going to work with Olokun, if you are going to set up that ancestral wealth invocation, you should absolutely cleanse yourself first with that deep sea protection bath. Then set up the blue and black candle vigil on your altar with that dark water. And then do the ancestral wealth invocation, right? In which you're working with the silver coins and the salt water that you lay out until 11 o'clock tonight. Okay? You can also this could be done outside if you can't do any of the other things that I've said. Especially if you were going to do the crossroads water offering, do a clay or sand drawing using your fingers to draw a symbol that will represent you and your ancestors, and then ask Olokun to assist. But again, I would only really do that if you were accepted to do the deep sea protection bath. Okay. So what we're now going to talk about is the indigenous Turtle Island workings that we can do that is more so hoodoo based. And so we never really talk about how water rites are very instrumental and rooted in, and many of our hoodoo water rites are very vital and instrumental to Southeastern indigenous and Gullah culture, right? And so we really want to highlight that here because it represents a portion of who we are. We've already talked about the water and the corn offerings of the Mississippi, the Choctaw, the Muskogee. But one of the other things that you can do is make sure that you soak corn kernels in spring water and add some of that bluing, right? And this could be an offering for peace, protection, and remembrance. And this could especially be done if you don't get to work with Olokun. Listen, I got on my work shirt. And what I mean work shirt is things I do around the house. And also sleeping in, but child, because I be cleaning this stuff in this shirt, I be having holes in them galore. But anyways, you could really work with the hoodoo workings if you don't feel comfortable enough or you are not accepted to work with Olokun and Yamoshe, okay? So I really wanted to say that. And one of them is corn being soaked in spring water. And you can add blue cornmeal and blue ink as an offering for peace, protection, and remembrance to your ancestors. You can also do a dream smoke ceremony, which is Afro Indigenous in nature, in which you can burn mullein. I usually have mullein around here somewhere, but it's downstairs because I made a tea out of it. You can burn mullein, damiana. Oh man, I gotta get some more damiana too, and some blue vervain, which can also help you interacting with the dream spirits. Right? You can do a water drum activation. So this is very Afro Indigenous, but also Cherokee coded. When you understand more about a Cherokee ceremonial land rites. And this is where you fill a bowl with spring water. You gently drum over the water surface while invoking your ancestors' names, right? Also, you can have 3 vessels of water. This is very much so Black and Native traditions, in which bowl 1 is for tears, bowl 2 is for rain, and bowl 3 is for river water. This is very great for grief renewal, memory, and also because of who are the indigenous groups that really were instrumental in these 3 vessel altar rites. And keep in mind, altars can also be outside and in land, right? I would recommend you adding wildflower petals, because a lot of these certain rites were done in regions where there were a lot of wildflower prairies, in which the wildflowers and their petals were offered as offerings, a part of the libations that you did for the water. So I would recommend that, and also adding obsidian and possibly a bone charm if you have one. And the themes for the spiritual eclipse, when you're looking through it from the indigenous and the hoodoo land rights perspectives, again, is about dream, death, reversal workings. And then when you overlay the energy in the portal that Yamoje and Olokun are talking about, it's often coming through the lens of ancestral lineage, matrilineal lines, which you talked a lot about in the last video, and also soul retrievals. It's a good time to use any of what we talked about. So the dream smoke ceremony, the corn and water offering, the water drum activation, or the 3 water vessels to do cord cutting with compassionate departures, which water technology could be known for. And it could drown you too, but that's neither here nor there. Also for purifying, banishing, returns, reversals, bindings, wardens, protections, which I fully recommend with the portal energy that Olokun and Yamoje is bringing through and has brought through, since we're in that, portal low area. I would recommend absolutely, if you're going to do your workings and rituals and routines through a hoodoo, I don't want to say perspective, but using hoodoo as a spiritual technology, because it is a spiritual technology system. Absolutely good around this time for cord cutting with compassion, purifying, banishing, warding, yada 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 yada. Yes. So, okay. Now that we've more so talked about the more so the rituals and the workings that we would do with Yamoje, with Olokun, but also through a hoodoo, and also an indigenous land rights perspective, we can talk about Pisces. So if you're going to work with Pisces energy from an astrological perspective, working with Blue Lotus is really about spiritual evolving, spiritual awakening, also honoring lunar devotion, that Yamoje energy, especially with the moon being in Cancer. And I would recommend teas, smudges. That'll be something that you do before 11/14, right? Mugwort, again, if you're going to do dream work, ancestral travel, psychic vision. Also working with Yemoje's rituals and workings that we just talked about, right? And also working with ancestral states, which could be associated with Olokun. Chamomile. Chamomile is for emotional soothing, especially after this eclipse, and also spiritual purification. And I would recommend using this like drinking a tea, or also in a bath, especially around lunar anxiety. And lunar anxiety is high right now because because we're in the middle of a portal. A passion flower around nervous system calming and spiritual rest. And this is really highlights like a Pisces connection to surrender, but also it's very Neptunian and water frequency coded. So we'll work with it from that perspective. Also, willow bark. It was something when I wrote this out that I wanted to give as a warning for willow bark. But number one, if you're going to work with willow bark, I would recommend already know how to use it. And then number two, Google, because there could be, if I remember right, some counter interactions with certain medications if you take willow bark. That's not at the top of my head right now, but absolutely will work for willow bark with grief, mourning, ancestral water rites, and this is especially good for womb and moon healing. So emotional healing when we're talking about womb healing. Crystals that are associated with Pisces are amethyst, so intuition, clarity, dream protection. Amethyst is Pisces' birthstone, and it enhances your visions and also your grace. Ooh, okay. Got to get my legs out of crisscross applesauce, but we are doing good on time. We got like a couple more minutes, and then we out this thing, baby. Moonstone. Now, if you're going to work with moonstone, just work with traditional moonstone, not blue or not rainbow. And this is working with divine feminine energy. Again, the mothers. We've had four mothers who are really walking through this water technology portal for us, really uplifting that ancestral energy. It's also moonstone can also represent intuition, womb, and water memory. So this is perfect for the eclipse portal that we're currently in, and also enhancing Yamoje's rituals. I am like, these mosquito bites are killing me. They're itching so bad right now. Okay. Aquamarine. Aquamarine can be used, and it's a stone associated with Pisces for courage, surrender, sea memory. It connects again to Pisces and also Yemoje's emotional tides. Celestite really works well with the angelic realm. So take what you want about, like angels, angelic realm, but essentially the higher realms. It's also great in dream recall and calling in soft peace. Celestite is absolutely a good dream crystal if you want to work with your Ori. And also if you just want to overall work with Pisces dreaming energy, right? So you can put that under your pillow before you go to sleep or before you take a nap, right? Just make sure you set your alarm clock to wake up or do certain protection things if you sleep past that 11-14 window, okay? The next one I recommend, we've already talked about it, is Black Obsidian. Black Obsidian represents ancestral memory. It also is closely associated with the eclipse, shadow work, grounding, and also psychic protection. So I would definitely work with Black Obsidian. Herbs that are associated with Yemoje, again, white rose, pumpkin. Sorry, a white rose. My bad. I said pumpkin. I am hungry though, but white rose. White rose represents purity, mother, healing, and also beauty magic. And it is very good and very used in the beauty offerings and beauty rituals, and also could be definitely used in your baths. Cotton blossom, which represents ancestral womb, lineage, and softness, absolutely tied to some of the southern Black indigenous rites that we talked about, especially if you're honoring the corn moon. Coconut oil, water, or the meat offerings, period. So it could be used in that water bowl offering, especially the one you take to the river. Just make sure if you're going to have that coconut oil or that coconut meat, you just lit in honey, paying homage to Oshun, right? And that's because coconut is a sacred Yemoje food, and it's absolutely used as an offering. Also, lotus leaf. Lotus leaf is associated with Yemoje in some ways because it represents enlightenment, grace, womb cleansing, particularly potent in Afro-Indigenous and Kemetic practices. So in addition to working with the Loa, working with Orisha, we also, and Indigenous land rights and Indigenous rematriation, we also work with our Kemetic ancestors. So you could absolutely use the lotus leaf while honoring Yemoje. but also understanding the perspective that our Kemetic ancestors got from it, which was about enlightenment and grace, and also the womb cleansing. Motherwort. Motherwort is a very good herb. It's associated with Yemoj, and it represents womb protection, fierce love. It is a great herb, a fierce herb to work with if you're doing mother protection spells, but also in boundary working. Okay. So some of the crystals you can work with if you're working with Yemoj is blue calcite, and that is soothing, healing, and it also represents intuition. It can help very much with vocal expression, but also for inner child care. Pearl, of course, oceanic power because it comes out of the ocean, beauty, and also perfection, and it is also very much so loved by Yemoshe. So if you have a pearl, it will be very good to put near your bath or on ancestral offering, water bowl, different other things like that. I'm trying to see, do I want to highlight anything else? Oh, selenite. Yes. Selenite is cleansing. Also, lunar blessings to be able to bless your altars, to bless any workings that you're doing with Yemoj. And it makes it that you align more closely with the moon and the tides. And that's especially important with the moon being in Cancer until 11:14 tonight. And then Lemire, and that is a Caribbean derived. So we know that Yemaye is also more of the Caribbean base, so Candomblé, Santorini, etc. And so they have a slightly different spelling in the Caribbean, which, is a part of our culture. And this particularly is for the invocation of Caribbean waters and activation around wisdom and matrilineal healing is especially powerful, like I said, for our siblings, our brothers, our sisters who have Caribbean heritage. If you already have that stone in your possession, it would be very good for forms of matrilineal healing. And it's a rare stone that is deeply aligned with Yemoj's energy, especially around daughters and children. Okay, let's move into Olakun herbs. Kelp or sea salt, or sea, I said sea salt, seaweed. Oceanic ancestors call fertility. Definitely can be used dried in a water bowl or altar offering. Black walnut, yes. A spiritual armor around your electromagnetic field, ancestral strengthening, especially about recalling your power, doing that ancestral wealth invocation that I told you about. But use with caution in rituals. Use with caution whenever you work with black walnut, but especially if you're using it for ancestral and Olakun purposes, because black walnut is also associated with detachment, banishing, and warding. So you could unknowingly be doing detachment, banishing, and warding when you work with that. I'm not going to talk about that. I had to think about, it's one specific herb that I wrote down that I know I shouldn't talk about out loud. And then patchouli. Patchouli is an herb that you can work with when you are working with Olakun's energy because it represents hidden wealth, which Olakun represents like the underworld wealth, right? Also, it represents root magic, also working with our root energy center, being rooted, but also working with primordial waters and shadow workings that are tied to deep waters and also our underground resources. Okay. Crystals, if you want to work with Pisces energy, are lavenderite. So lavenderite represents mysticism, deep waters, unconscious. This is a true I'm sorry, I said Pisces. Lavenderite is a true Olakun gem. I can't show you right now, but around my ankles, I keep lavenderite. Lavenderite stay on me. I don't think I got lavenderite on right now. No. So, but usually I keep lavenderite on me at all times. Jed. Jed represents protection, underworld wisdom, and also ancestral rights for safety. Smoky quartz. Smoky quartz represents transmutation, grounding. And it also keeps the eclipse energy that we're currently in from feeling chaotic. And blue tiger's eye, I am so attracted to blue tiger's eye right now. I do not know why. But if you're going to work with Olakun's energy, the blue tiger's eye represents clairvoyance, stealth tracking, and also tracking down soul contracts so you can change them, get rid of them. And it's also linked to dream recall and ancestral protection. We're not going to talk about the eclipse herbs, but if you do want to know what they are, we were going to talk about Damiana and wormwood and rue. Yes, but we're not going to talk about that here. We're also not going to talk about the crystals that are associated with eclipses historically. It's obsidian, if you wanted to know, obsidian, carnelian, and garnet. We will talk about Pisces energy, though. So Pisces energy typically represents the third eye, so intuition, dreams, psychic energy. Pisces is also ruled by Neptune, and it governs the imagination, dreams, and vision. Crown energy, if you're going to work with Pisces, so our crown energy center, which governs our spiritual downloads, divine connection in the liminal spaces. Again, Pisces governs this because of its connection to soul surrendering, collective consciousness, and mysticism. You can also do, these are not necessarily energy centers or chakras, but you can do your feet or your soul energy centers, because you do have energy centers in your soles of your feet. And this is for spiritual grounding. If you're going to work with Pisces, Olokun, Yemoje, water energy, you can quickly become ungrounded. So that would be something that I would make sure I work with. I'm not going to talk about that. If you're going to work with energy centers, so when you're working with Yemoje's energy, I will work with the sacral, the heart, and also the breast and the womb's energy. So the breast and the womb are governed by the moon and thus Yemoje. So I will work with that. If you are going to work with the sacral energy center, understand its connection to Yemoje. Understand that it represents fertility, womb waters, and also creation, because Yemoje governs motherhood, reproduction, emotional tides, and also healing through tears. If you're going to work with Yemoje and use the heart energy center, which Yemoje is traditionally associated with, because the sacral energy is known to be associated with Oshun, the heart energy is the workings with unconditional love and protective embrace. And this really centers on Yemoje's connection to being called the mother of all, and works through heart-led nurturing, right? If you're going to work with the breast and the womb energy centers, really working with literal milk, but also working with processes like nourishment creation. In ATRs, the breast and the moon are altars themselves, right? And so Yemoje blesses those altars through water rites. So if you do workings, you can do workings with breast and the womb, because in ATRs, they are considered altars themselves. Well, you are considered an altar, but then additionally, the breast and the womb are considered additional altars because of their life-giving creation properties and creatrix properties, right? If you're going to do any activations dealing with Yemoje, again, I would recommend doing emotional healing through tears, nurturing of inner child and lineage, because of the deep amount of ancestral work that we've been doing, and also regenerative creation and divine feminine protection. If you're going to work with Olokun and work with energy centers, I would recommend working with the root. So the root, and we've already talked about this, is ancestral memory, wealth, security. Olokun governs hidden wealth, deep root systems, and submerged inheritance. Third eye and crown, this is about that dreaming element, the trance states, the keeper of the abyss, the keeper of the mysteries. Olokun walks through psychic depths, the liminal spaces, which primordialness is also, at its essence, liminal. Okay? And also subconscious, body, bones, marrow. So cellular memory, spiritual legacy. Olokun is deeply tied to the unconscious and the dream world infrastructure. So that would be the way that those would be what I work with when I'm working with Olokun. So that is the root, the third eye or crown, but also hyper focusing on the subconscious, the body, your bones, and marrow, right? Are ways that you can work with the subtle energies of Olokun. If you're going to do Hoodoo or root work. Many Southern Black Hoodoo and indigenous traditions have their own ritual maps for the energy centers that were activated by this eclipse portal. And that is the hand. So I would anoint the hands with Florida water or sea salt oil for spiritual catch and release. Spiritual catching and releasing is a type of return to sender, a type of warding or a type of banishing, depending on the different energies that you use with it. Specifically mouth, prayer, to catch something. Do you get what I'm saying? Okay. And then foot. So foot, again, use that salt and Florida water to make a foot soak out of, to open up dream portals and really honor that Pisces rulership. And also womb and lower belly. So using castor oil. If you really knew the power of castor oil in the belly button, baby. If you really knew the power of castor oil, because I sure will put a castor oil pack on, and this is like a heated thing that I use on my cycle. If you really knew. But if you're going to work with womb energy, please use castor oil, motherwort, salves, and also do fertility offerings if you have an altar inside or outside. Also, with the way hoodoo energy works, if you're going to work with this Pisces energy, I would really recommend working on the bone and the spine. So that would be smoke cleanses and vibration work through drums or rattling to reawaken, realign, or reignite that Olokun energy, that primordial, that subconscious energy that lives in the base of your spine. All right, y'all, we've been here for an hour 45. Thank you for coming. Please only work with the particular things that I particularly highlighted around Pisces, Olokun, and Yamojay's energy until later today at 11:14 p.m. But overall, thank you so much for coming to this lesson. I'm so happy to finally have gotten it out, and even more happy that the way everything lined up meant that this was not going to be behind our Patreon wall. So my name is Jasmine. This is Flourish Homestead and Apothecary. Thank you so much for being here. And we will talk to y'all soon. Bye, y'all.